Hey everybody, welcome to the Seagull Football Network. I'm Braden, this is my brother Ben. Today we are diving in and talking about the first two teams in the AFC East, doing deep dives on those. We're starting with the first and fourth ranked teams from 2024, and then next week we will do the second and third ranked teams. But first we do have a little bit of news that I'm going to announce. It was a little bit of a slow news week, not a ton happened. Firstly, the Indianapolis Colts owner Jim Irsay did pass away this past week. He was, I believe, 65 years old. So our hearts and prayers go out to Indianapolis, his whole family, the Colts. There were a lot of really heartfelt messages from all the teams in the league. Everybody had very fond memories of Jim, so praying for his family. The Lions did get some defensive depth, signing linebacker Zach Cunningham. He's played for a couple teams over the last few years, kind of bounced around, and they're looking for some depth in case they have the injury bug again this year. And lastly, Bills defensive end Joey Bosa injured his calf while practicing and is out until training camp / indefinitely. I kind of saw both terms being tossed around. And that'll kind of impact some of our conversation as we go in, because we are going to start off by talking about the Buffalo Bills. Ben, what do you see as the Buffalo Bills' biggest strength in 2025?
Yeah, it was tough to pick one strength for this team because I think that the Buffalo Bills are a very good team this year. But I did settle on their run game. I think the Bills' offensive line, it's one of the biggest and strongest in the league right off the bat. Deion Dawkins and Spencer Brown, they're very strong tackles, but their interior is even more powerful than those two. Led by center Connor McGovern, David Edwards, and third-year guard Osiris Torrance. That creates one of the heaviest fronts in the league, and all five of these players are just incredible run blockers. And in Joe Brady's offense, it's just set up for them to succeed. General manager Brandon Beane is unfortunately keeping a pretty strong stance with upcoming free agent James Cook, and it may be a mistake if this year goes the way I think it will, because it means that price to keep him around will be significantly more expensive. Last year, Cook averaged 4.9 yards per attempt, and I expect a very similar season this year. As long as they give him the ball early and often, behind this offensive line, I see a season with far more than 1,000 yards and once again double-digit touchdowns. So for me, even with returning MVP Josh Allen in the fold, I think that James Cook and that run game are the best part of this team, and I think that that's really the tempo setter for this team. That's what can help them win games, because when you run early, you run often, that allows Josh Allen the flexibility to do the Josh Allen stuff that we're so used to seeing.
Yeah, that makes sense. I do like James Cook. I feel like he really broke out last season. It is going to be interesting trying to see what they do with their contract. He is asking for a lot of money. He's saying 20 to 25 million was some of what I saw, even 15 million, which is still a lot for a running back. I've been pretty outspoken that I think running backs should be paid kind of fairly. So I'm not opposed to it. I would like to see maybe one more really solid season out of him before they commit to all that money, because this really was his best season and he didn't look amazing prior to that. But it is going to be something to keep an eye on for sure. And speaking of Josh Allen, that is who I picked out as the Bills' greatest strength. I have been on the record as saying I'm not the biggest Josh Allen fan, especially back when he was leading the league in interceptions and turnovers, right? Like I saw that as a really big flaw. And while I don't think that he should have won the MVP award last season, he is far and away, I think, the best part of the Buffalo Bills. He did improve his turnover rate last season, finishing the season with only 6 interceptions. And you compare that to his 40 total touchdowns, and you can really see that he did improve. He balanced himself out a little bit more, played a little bit less hero ball, and really played against defenses a lot better. His touchdown total is slightly reduced from 2023, which is likely due to that run game that we talked about previously. Having a legitimate run game can really balance the offense out a little bit more. And that being said, as long as he doesn't regress to his interception-happy form, I think he'll have a phenomenal 2025 and continue to put the team on his back in every game that they play.
Yeah, I agree. And, obviously, I agree that Lamar Jackson was definitely a more deserving MVP candidate. Josh Allen put together an MVP season, so it's certainly not something to laugh at to say that he didn't deserve the MVP. I think that he absolutely did, and he did a great job last year, especially, like you said, cutting down on those mistakes. He only had 3,700 yards versus the past couple of seasons with 4,000. But like you said, it's that run game that's opening up the pass game, and it means that he doesn't have to put the whole team on his back. And I personally am a big fan of that. Like it's not like Tom Brady and Peyton Manning did it by themselves every single year of their career. And the more support that they put around Josh, the better he's able to be, and the more he's able to just sit back and let the offense come to him. And I think Joe Brady's also done a great job coming in as the offensive coordinator. I believe that was his second full season at the wheel, and I think that that's just a great opportunity for him. And I think he's done a great job with Josh Allen. Funny enough, talking about Josh Allen and that pass game again, my greatest weakness, I selected the wide receiver room. Um, Keon Coleman was their second round pick last year. He was pretty high in the second round. He showed flashes of greatness in his rookie season. He was a very good receiver, I think he'll certainly take strides this year. But I was really hoping to see them add maybe another big weapon or two. Slot receiver Khalil Shakir and gadget player Curtis Samuel. They've been very good for Buffalo for multiple years at this point, but they're not star playmakers. They're not that number two that we need. Shakir's a great slot receiver, and Curtis Samuel, like I said, is a gadget. I wanted to see another number two boundary receiver. And Buffalo signed former Chargers receiver Josh Palmer and former Jets and Browns receiver Elijah Moore in free agency to hopefully fill that void. But I mean, I know you think a little differently, but I don't necessarily see either of them as entirely filling that boundary receiver role. They could, but I just don't see them as talented as I was hoping they would fill that role with. Overall, this receiver room, like I said, really could have used another proven playmaker to complement Coleman a bit more. The lack of playmakers has never really slowed down Josh Allen before, but I'm sure he'd appreciate playing a season in which he doesn't have to play so much hero ball and he doesn't have to put so much of himself out there every week. And unfortunately, I just don't think they did enough in this room to make the wide receiver room really not a concern for me. Do I think it'll slow down their offense? Not really, with James Cook and just Josh Allen being Josh Allen, but it is, in my opinion, the weakest part of this team. But I will say it says a lot about how good I think a team is when the weakest part of their team is not the biggest concern to me overall.
Yeah, that's fair. Like you said, Allen's proven that he can get it done without, star receivers out there. Obviously, he had Stephon Diggs, but he maintained the same production pretty much when he left. So I did go a different direction though with what I picked out as the weakness. I ended up going with the defense, and as we were talking a little bit, coming like right before the episode, I know you disagree with me a little bit, um, but I'll go ahead and state my case here. It does feel strange to say that the defense is going to be their biggest weakness, given the recent history of this defense. However, I have some stats to back it up. Per PFF, their defense ranked 16th in EPA per play last season and were 31st in coverage grades. Their defense against the pass, especially, was terrible. Against the run was a little bit better, but still not amazing. And while they have made some moves to try to help fix the problem, I'm not convinced that it is enough. On the defensive line, they added Joey Bosa, who, as we mentioned previously, is currently injured and has some injury history as well. They also signed Larry Ogunjobi and Michael Hoyt, who are both suspended for part of the season opening the year. They also then brought in 30-year-old Trey White and Dane Jackson, who were both previously Bills, left to go to other teams, and now they're bringing them back. And I just don't know that they're going to quite be the same players that they were used to a couple years ago. And I really just don't see the defense improving too much from last season. Obviously, they had a couple injuries last year, people coming back. I do really like their linebacking core and their interior defensive line. I do like those players a lot, but I think they're missing quite a bit in the secondary and on the pass rush side as well. And so I'm just not sure that it's enough to really improve those stats that I mentioned, enough to really make them a top defense in the league. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I see what you're saying about the defense. I think the defense is certainly not as strong as it has been in the past couple of Sean McDermott coached seasons, but it's just, I mean, well, one, I'd say even from the perspective of thinking that it's probably their biggest weakness, again, Their defense is good. It's not great, necessarily from your perspective, but it is good. And once again, I think that that just speaks to how good the Buffalo Bills are in 2025. To say that this is their biggest weakness when they've got a lot of good playmakers on the board here. Um, but no, in my opinion, I don't see the defense as big of a concern as you talk about. Obviously, Joey Bosa being injured isn't ideal at all, but I think he will be plenty ready for the season. I think they're being especially cautious with him just given his injury history. I think they're giving him the time to heal and recuperate more than the Chargers have in the past. I loved the additions of Michael Hoyt and Larry Ogunjobi. Obviously, they are suspended, but when they come back, they're great rotational pieces, package pieces. Obviously, they drafted T.J. Sanders, Deone Walker, and Landon Jackson. And once again, those are pieces who they're not going to start and play every down, every snap, but they're players who can make an impact on specific plays and in pressure packages pretty much from day one. And I just think that that really adds to Sean McDermott's typical MO with his with his defensive line. Excuse me. Obviously, I see what you're saying about the secondary. Tre'Davious White and Dane Jackson. I think are going to be more rotational package players, nickel and dime sets, because I think Maxwell Harrison will start day one across from Christian Benford. And so I'm not a fan of the safety room at all. Taylor Rapp and DeMar Hamlin were two of the worst rated safeties in the league last year. Cole Bishop was drafted in the second round and hardly played defense. Um, so I see what you're saying. There's holes here and there, but overall, I really do like the defense. I think the defense. I mean, they're not going to be a top five, top 10 unit, but I think they're a good unit, and I think that they're plenty good enough to get them to the playoffs and support Josh Allen and the explosive offense.
Yeah, that's fair. I will add one of the stats that I forgot to mention is that they did allow a 68.4% completion percentage, which ranks them fifth worst in the league as well. So that's just kind of another tack that onto the secondary rating. I think that's definitely probably the biggest flaw on the defense. But enough about that. Let's move on and talk about the best veteran addition for the Buffalo Bills. Ben, who did you pick out?
Yeah, so we already talked about him a little bit. My selection was former Los Angeles Chargers defensive end Joey Bosa. He will only be 30 come July. So I think, he has shown some advanced age in recent years, less in production, and multiple seasons cut short due to injury. But in Buffalo, again, I don't think he has to be the guy. He's able to serve in a more rotational role. Sean McDermott's defense is built for that, complementing the likes of Greg Rousseau, Landon Jackson, Michael Hoyt when he returns from suspension. And I think that this allows him both more time to rest and recuperate before the season and during the season, as well as the ability to focus more specifically on his greatest strength, which is his pass rush. He doesn't have to be an every down player necessarily. Think how the Bills used Von Miller in the past couple of seasons. Von Miller is currently still a free agent, but Von Miller was a Buffalo Bill for the last couple of seasons. And what they did with him is what I imagine they're going to be doing with Joey Bosa, where Miller didn't play every down. He was a pass rush specialist, and they only threw him out there when they needed his just elite pass rushing skills. And I mean, Von Miller certainly had a whole lot less injury issues in Buffalo than he did prior because he didn't have to play all the time. And I think that's what Bosa's strength is going to be here in Buffalo. Um, I think that given this situation and Sean McDermott's defensive scheme being very pass rush rotation friendly, Bosa is going to have a season that more resembles 3 to 4 years ago, 2020, 2021, rather than last year and the year before where he played 5, 6 games total.
Yeah, I do disagree a little bit. I think the injury concern is something that bothers me a little bit. And obviously, we saw the Von Miller experiment really didn't pay off, I think, how the Bills wanted it to. He was okay for a couple years, and then last year he was really terrible. And I'm afraid they're going to kind of repeat history here with Von Miller. Obviously, there's the injury concern. He's already injured before training camp has even started. And then I'm also concerned about his attitude issues. He's really displayed some discipline problems and attitude problems over the last couple of years. And he's had some pretty decent coaches, and it doesn't seem like any of that has been able to be coached out so far.
Maybe contributed to more penalties than a lot of players do on average. But I will disagree with the having great coaches thing. He was a Los Angeles Charger. The Chargers have been a mess for years. He hasn't really had all that great coaching. I mean, Brandon Staley is notorious for being kind of a stuck up type of coach, and he's not very focused on development of players and stuff like that. And before that, it was Anthony Lynn, who was pretty well known for running his team like it was a freaking military barracks, and he would yell at players and treat them like they didn't matter to him. And so I wouldn't exactly say that he had the best coaching ever. Whereas Sean McDermott is known as a very good coach to connect with his players and make that, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So if anybody's going to bring out the best in him, it's going to be Sean McDermott, not the coaches that he had in Los Angeles slash San Diego. But I will say, when he's been on the field, also in terms of his injury, he has been pretty consistently one of the best pass rush win rate players on the field. But again, like you said, the injuries do come into play there.
Yeah, I mean, it's just something we're gonna have to see if those attitude problems change, if the injury sticks with him, or if he has another injury. I don't know. That's my concern. And the fact that he's already injured is part of the reason I didn't pick him. Now, who I did go with.
They're valid concerns. They're valid concerns. I absolutely agree. I think they're being overly careful with him, but I do see what you're saying, and so yeah, I see why you didn't select him. But for me, he's just too great of a possible talent to not talk about.
Now, I know you also disagree a little bit with who I picked for Best Veteran Edition, because I went through the list and, you know, probably the top two or three I would have picked are some of the defensive guys who are injured and suspended right now. So I did end up going with wide receiver Josh Palmer, who you mentioned a little bit earlier. I think Josh Palmer brings a little bit more to the Bills wide receiver room. Obviously, it's a room full of, kind of middling wide receiver twos and threes, like you mentioned before. And Josh Palmer, he's not stellar. He's not a wide receiver one. He's not going to come in and flip the whole demeanor of the room. But he is a solid receiver who I think fits really well into Buffalo's wide receiver room. He is kind of that two wide receiver three kind of guy. But he does have some abilities that I think really help bolster the room where some other receivers might not have the same skill set. I really like how he's able to find soft spots in zone coverage, especially. And I really like how he runs routes. He runs routes really cleanly. And I'm not really sure that the Chargers utilized him to the fullest of his abilities. And so I think with, obviously a top probably 5 or 6 quarterback in Josh Allen, I think it's going to give Josh Palmer the opportunities that he needs to really shine in that wide receiver room. And I think he could be the number 2 or 3 by the end of the season.
Yeah, I can't really speak on whether or not the Chargers used him correctly or used him as well as they could have in the past. But it's just one of those things where he definitely wasn't their number one. He was far from it, and he was just fine. It's not that he was bad; he was just fine. And I think if he is just fine in Buffalo, he'll be a good number two, number three, depending on whether you count Shakir as their number two or number three. And so I see why, yeah, you selected him. It's just tough for me to make the argument that he is the best impact veteran addition. But yeah, he very well could be a good receiver for the Buffalo Bills. And so I do like that selection. I'd love to see some of the film that you're talking about where you think that they didn't use him correctly. Because I will say I didn't watch as much Chargers film in the past couple of years as I could have. So I'd be definitely interested to see some of that.
Moving on to the next category, best rookie addition. Who did you pick out? Who do you think the Bills' best rookie this season is?
Yeah, so for me, I think that there were a lot of choices. I really liked the Bills draft. There were a lot of good picks there. Like I talked about, I already was a huge fan of their defensive line selections with Sanders, TJ Sanders, Landon Jackson, Deion Walker. Obviously, they took Maxwell Hairston in the first round, and I love Maxwell Hairston. I don't think it would have been justifiable to take him in the first round by any other team, but he's such an incredibly perfect scheme fit for the Buffalo Bills that it just makes so much sense. Some of their picks in the later rounds were great depth or special teams selections. So I actually really liked their draft overall. But I did end up settling on their third round pick, the 72nd overall selection in the draft, and that is defensive end Landon Jackson out of Arkansas. Landon Jackson is an insanely rare size and length combination that I absolutely loved watching on film. Jackson's a great run stopper with the length to swim through multiple blockers, just like that, in the blink of an eye. His pass rushing is not nearly as well developed. There's a reason he, went all the way down to the third round, but he showed flashes in certain pressure packages. Jackson went to the perfect defense, in my opinion, as well, to emphasize the strengths he already has and to give him the time and space to develop the traits that still need work. The Buffalo Bills have a very good defensive line group already, and they know that. And so all of the players that they selected, I'm not trying to take the focus off of Landon Jackson here, but TJ Sanders, he's got time to sit under Daquan Jones and Ed Oliver. Same with Deone Walker. Landon Jackson has time to sit under they've got a couple of really good pass rushers. But specifically Joey Bosa, excuse me, he's an older edge, signed a 1-year contract with Buffalo. It gives Landon Jackson 1 year at least to serve more as a package-oriented player, come in on early downs where he can use his natural talent against the run, start, playing more, some early passing down sets. And if Buffalo plays their cards with him correctly, I think he could be one of the most consistent and dangerous defensive ends in the NFL in only a few years.
Yeah, that's fair. I did end up going with the player you mentioned briefly there, cornerback Maxwell Hairston. The Bills' current approach to fixing their secondary seems to me to be quantity over quality. Bringing back some of the older guys that they had on the team before, re-signing a couple corners who were about to leave in free agency. They really seem to be trying to like pile everybody in the room so they can see who the best of them are and roll with them. And Harrison does add a little bit of both. I think he adds the quantity and the quality. He's by no means the best corner in this draft. We talked about some of the best ones in some of our other videos, but I think he does have the skills to add to this defense quickly. My biggest concern for him is going to be his size. He comes in at 5'11", 183 pounds. Now, the way that they're going to use him, that might not matter, but it is potentially going to be a weakness of his that offenses will exploit if they see that and try to get matchups with him with bigger guys who can kind of push him around and bully him a little bit more. That being said, I do think he's a really good pick for the Bills. I agree he's a great scheme fit, and I'm excited to see what they're able to do with him in this season. All right, moving on to the last little bit for the Buffalo Bills here. Let's talk about the projected record. Ben, how do you have the Bills performing in the 2025 season?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the Buffalo Bills, like I already talked about. I think that they're going to be a great team, and I only see them winning double digit games. I don't see any other alternative here. My official projection for them is a 13-4 season, with a floor of 11-6 and a ceiling of 15-2. I think this team could be one of the best in the NFL in 2025.
Interesting. Yeah, mine's pretty similar. I think you're up a game on all of them. I have them going 12-5 with a ceiling of 14-3 and a floor of 10-7. So I agree, double-digit wins is the most likely, barring obviously there's random stuff that could happen, injuries and whatnot, that could affect that. But everything remaining kind of stable, I think that's about where they'll sit. Okay, that wraps up the Buffalo Bills. Let's move on to the fourth-ranked team from the AFC East last season. That is the New England Patriots. Now, these Patriots look a lot different than they did last season. A lot of different roster changes, coaching changes, all sorts of stuff like that. So, Ben, what do you see as the Patriots' biggest strength going into 2025?
Yeah, as you said, these Patriots look a lot different than their 2024 counterparts. I think that this team could also be a whole lot better than their 2024 counterparts. They're gonna be hard pressed to be a playoff team or even be a winning record team. But I think that they actually do have the chance to have a winning record this year, or at least surprise a couple of teams where you might think that it's an easy win for the other team. The biggest change, in my opinion, is also their biggest strength, and that is the coaching staff. The roster has changed a decent bit from last year, and I think it will contribute to the team being much better. But I think the biggest change, as I said, the thing that's going to affect them the most is Gerard Mayo. He just wasn't getting it done. Obviously, that he only got 1 year to really prove himself, and I think that isn't exactly fair. But I also can't really fault them with their selection for coaching this year, being Mike Vrabel, a former NFL player himself, 3-time Super Bowl winner, and a great leader of men. He was the Tennessee Titans head coach for multiple years, and his time in Tennessee was a mixed bag. But that came, in my opinion, and in a lot of reporting elements, it came more from his attempts to manage the roster over coaching the team. On the coaching side, he was a very, very good coach, and he proved it year in and year out. Especially his defensive prowess. I think that as long as he continues to focus on just his coaching, on just his defense, and allows Elliot Wolf, the director of player personnel, to do his stuff on his side, I think Vrabel is going to continue to be a great coach, and I think it's an incredible step for the New England Patriots. His selection for offensive coordinator was also pretty legendary, in my opinion, and that is he brought back a New England mainstay, being Josh McDaniels. McDaniels was out of coaching in 2024, but he's always been a great offensive coordinator, particularly in New England, where he's had several stops as the offensive coordinator. And every year that he's been in New England, he's had a great offense. If I were to pick out any coach to help develop sophomore QB Drake May, McDaniels would be one of my top choices. Overall, this coaching staff is going to help the team establish a much stronger identity than that of Gerard Mayo's Patriots. They're a very strong group of coaches. I think this could lead to a winning record. Only 1 year really after winning 4 games. And even if they don't have a winning record, it's certainly going to be a lot better than their 4 game season.
Yeah, I definitely agree that they're going to improve. And I don't hate the coaching staff. Josh McDaniels, he's good as an offensive coordinator, but he has had a couple embarrassing stops as well, that are tough to forget about. And then we were talking a little bit before the episode about Mike Vrabel. It's interesting to me that the Patriots went from former Patriots linebacker as a head coach to another former Patriots linebacker as a head coach. They've got a little bit of a pattern going there. Um, I think Vrabel will be perfectly fine this season. I don't think he's going to have any kind of issues. Um, I do know what you're saying, where some of the roster control was an issue. I think there are deeper issues, and we talked a little bit about that. We don't have to go into all of that right now. That might be a topic for a deep dive later down the road, all on its own. But I definitely don't foresee any of those issues kind of coming forth in this first season with New England. I think he's going to be revitalized. He took a year off. At least head coaching. He was assistant coaching for a little bit there. And I think he's going to be good. However, I did go a different direction with the Patriots' greatest strength, and that is the secondary. Christian Gonzalez seemingly quietly had a great season at cornerback for the Patriots. I don't feel like he gets enough recognition for what he was doing, especially with how bad the rest of the team was around him. And then you pair him with Carlton Davis, who they brought in from the Lions, and support both of them with safeties Jabril Peppers and Kyle Duggar, and you have a really solid pass defense. Even if you move down and include the linebackers in that list, I think it still looks really good with Christian Ellis and Robert Spillane. With all of that said, I honestly think that the Patriots easily have the best secondary in their division. I don't really see it being very close. The Jets maybe are a close-ish second. But a couple of their corners kind of took a step back last season. I think a couple of one of their safeties left, I believe. I haven't looked fully into their roster for this season yet. But I really, really like the Patriots secondary going into this season.
Yeah, I also really like it. I like that defense as a whole. I mean, all the way from the front seven up. I mean, it's just a really well-rounded defense that I think has taken steps from last year, but also given that Mike Vrabel is going to be coaching them rather than Gerard Mayo, I think it's going to be a very interesting season for that defense. But specifically, like you said, that secondary with the addition of Carlton Davis, I'd love to see teams try to pass on them for sure.
Moving on to greatest weakness, what do you think is going to be the Patriots' biggest weakness in 2025?
Yeah, so I'm talking about this greatest weakness for me. It's a weird one because it's a weakness that I could totally see turn into a strength down the line. It's just something that I'm not exactly sure about yet because a lot of it's unproven and we just haven't seen enough from a lot of these players. For me, the greatest weakness that I selected is the wide receiver room. This group of wide receivers, like I said, has the potential to be a great group, but it also could be a complete dud right off the bat. Stephon Diggs is their number one receiver, and he was fine last year with Houston, but he did tear his ACL in 2024, and he is coming off of that injury at 31 years old. All of the reporting has said that he's been running good, that he's able to play in OTAs and all of that, but he definitely could see some decline even from just last year, and he certainly is not going to resemble the receiver that he was, 3 or 4 years ago in Buffalo. So we'll just have to see kind of what type of receiver he is for Drake May in 2025. Kendrick Byrne has been a great rotational receiver, but frankly, nothing more than that. So they needed to add more weapons. The signing of Mac Hollins gives Drake May a big target downfield, but Hollins is nothing special, really. He's not a high volume receiver, and he's also going on 32. Sophomore receivers Jalen Polk and Javon Baker were a second rounder and fourth rounder last year, respectively. But last year, they were absolute complete and total busts. They recorded less than 100 yards combined. Obviously, in 2025, they'll have another shot at it, but they were put on notice by the New England Patriots' current coaching staff because the coaching staff selected Kyle Williams, 69th overall out of Washington State. He is a great route runner, great speed. His size is a little bit of a concern, and he may have to start his career in the slot, but it certainly, once again, is one of those, maybe they're not so sure about Polk and Baker, so they bring in another receiver, kind of adding to like what I was saying, where it's like, okay, there's a lot of players that could be good. Polk could be good if he gets another season at the wheel. Javon Baker showed flashes in college. He was a good player in college, but it's just will they be able to put it all together at this level? Kyle Williams is a rookie, obviously. Demario Douglas was New England's best receiver in 2024, but he only had 621 yards on the season. And it's a big question whether he's going to continue to be a dominant receiver or if he's even going to continue to on that path of becoming a dominant receiver. Overall, this group of receivers could coalesce and create an incredible group of pass catchers for Drake May, but none of them are proven. None of them really. Even Diggs coming off of that ACL tear, we don't know what quantity we're playing with here, right? And with a new offensive coordinator in Josh McDaniels, it could just as easily be a very rough season for the passing game, and none of these receivers could pan out the way that we want them to. So that's why I put it as my biggest weakness because it has the potential. There are a lot of receivers on this list that I don't see a lot of value in at all, and then the ones that I do see value in are unproven.
Yeah, that's fair. I totally agree. In fact, I picked essentially the same thing as my greatest weakness. I did say offensive skill positions, specifically running back and wide receiver. Um, we'll start with the running backs. I really hope that Travion Henderson pans out. I like what I saw from him in college. I think he was a really good pick for the Patriots. And if he succeeds, I think it's going to make Drake May's life a lot easier. Ramondre Stevenson, he's had good seasons. Antonio Gibson, he's had good seasons. Last year, though, they were both awful. And until we actually see something change with them and we see them kind of pick themselves up and turn things around, I'm just not convinced that the run game is going to be the strongest, other than Travion Henderson. And then at wide receiver, like you mentioned, we have 31-year-old Stephon Diggs recovering from an ACL tear, which is not a joke of an injury. Statistics show that once you tear an ACL, you're actually a lot more likely to tear the other one because you start favoring it a little bit more during rehab. The other ACL is a lot stronger than your previous one that you had. So, hopefully that doesn't happen. But it is a tough injury to recover from. So we have Stephon Diggs, Demario Douglas, and then some other mediocre guys like you mentioned. And even Demario Douglas isn't super special just yet. They're all fine, but they're not the receivers that you really want in a room. And I think this puts a lot of pressure on Drake May to show up big, keep the offense running, and do it all himself. And I don't know yet if he is that type of player. Obviously, he's had a season, not even a full season, starting. So there's plenty of room for improvement, plenty of room for development. But I don't know that they're putting the right weapons around him now to actually set him up for that success in the future.
Absolutely. I think that Josh McDaniels is going to be a big contributor to that. I think he's going to help the offense look better, and he's going to help take the pressure off of Drake May. And I'm a big fan of Ramondre Stevenson. He got a big payday last season, and I think that he deserved it. Obviously, 2024 was rough for him, but it's also one of those things where 2024 was rough for everybody in New England. So, I mean, I would like to assume that he's definitely going to have a better season moving forward. And the 1-2 punch of him and Travion Henderson is just too much for me to put that in the biggest weakness category. But overall, yeah, if Josh McDaniels can put together a good offensive scheme, then maybe the receivers not being the greatest room isn't going to be as big of an issue as we might think it is currently.
All right, moving down the list to the best veteran addition. Who do you think was the Patriots' best vet that they picked out and added to their roster this season?
Yeah, so for me, it was a pretty easy selection, and I did choose former Philadelphia defensive lineman Milton Williams. If Philadelphia defensive coordinator Vic Fangio can do anything, it's develop a defensive lineman. Milton Williams was an undersized defensive tackle from Louisiana Tech who went in the third round in 2021 to the Eagles. And over his 4 years in Philadelphia, he developed into a formidable interior pass rusher and elite level run stopper. Multiple teams were in the running to sign Williams in free agency, and a deal was all but done to send him officially to Carolina. That's where all the reporting was going. But the Patriots swept in the final second and offered him a contract he couldn't refuse. They're now paying him $26 million for 4 years. And there's some argument that maybe that's a little rich for an interior defensive lineman, but I believe it's well worth it. Head coach Mike Vrabel is going to have a very fun time with him, wreaking havoc up the middle. He especially with his other signing on that front. And here I have a little bit of an honorable mention. Milton Williams, I'm a big fan of, but they did bolster the defensive line in another position, and that is a former Vrabel player, Harold Landry, at defensive end. He was a Tennessee Titan, and he was one of the best Tennessee Titans for the last 7 years. And frankly, I see no reason why he should take a step back in the same scheme where he put up 12 sacks in 2021. Um, Landry's only 29, and with Keon White across from him on the defensive line, he's on a stronger front than he's been on in a really long time, honestly. This front seven could be absolutely ferocious with Milton Williams, Keon White, Harold Landry. I'm very excited to see what Mike Vrabel can do because Vrabel's also really good about the multiple fronts. You know, he's got 3 down, 4 down, 5 down, 2 down sometimes, and I'm excited to see what he plays around with coming into 2025.
Yeah, for sure. I'm a really big fan of both of those players. I have a little bit of concern about Landry. He did have one major injury, um, and there was some decline to his play over the last couple of years, like year and a half. But if anybody's going to breathe life back into him, it's going to be Mike Vrabel. I did also stick with defense for my favorite veteran addition, but I did back it up a little bit into the secondary, and that is Carlton Davis, cornerback. He hasn't really missed a beat since leaving Tampa Bay, playing at the same level he has basically his entire career. I think he's a great fit for the Patriots defense. Like I said, I'm a really big fan of the secondary. I think he's a really good option opposite Christian Gonzalez. And he's played very, very consistently, like I said. And I expect he's going to show up big yet again in his 8th season in the league.
Yeah, I don't think Carlton Davis gets enough credit for what he does. He has been an incredible corner in the league, but unfortunately, he gets overshadowed by the players who get interception after interception after interception. But I think it's more valuable, frankly, to be a good coverage corner that teams don't want to throw to, so you're not really getting a lot of interceptions. And Carlton Davis is one of my favorite cornerbacks in the NFL, and I think he's one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL.
All right, that brings us up to the best rookie. Who did you pick out for the Patriots?
Yeah, so for me, I already talked about this player a little bit, and there's good reason, and that is their second round pick, 38th overall, only 6 picks into the second round, and that is running back Trevion Henderson out of Ohio State. Henderson is one of those magical backs, right? We talked about this some in our draft stuff, who can just disappear behind the line in a swamp of defenders. You're sure it's a tackle for loss, and somehow a second, 2 seconds later, he pops up on the other side completely unscathed. New England probably could have waited a few picks to take him. They probably could have gotten away not taking him at 38. But given how much incredible value Trevion Henderson brings to an offense, especially an offense with such a young quarterback in Drake May, I won't argue with this. And it's a team that desperately needed multiple sparks on offense. So frankly, 38, I'm totally good with it. I think that he's going to be a perfect complement to Ramondre Stevenson. I think it's going to be a 1-2 punch backfield. And I could see both of them having top tier seasons in Josh McDaniels' sneaky good run scheme. We saw, a couple of teams run multi-back schemes that actually worked out well for both backs. Emphasis on Detroit last year, and I think we could totally see that happening in New England, where they emphasize the run game and get a good season out of Ramondre and Trevion Henderson.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Like I said, I really hope that Henderson can kind of live up to the hype that he's gotten. I know he was kind of tossed around as one of the Obviously, not the best back in this draft. Ashton Genty definitely gets that, but one of the better ones up underneath him. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he's able to do. I did stay on the offense, but I did pick a different rookie, and that's their first round pick, tackle Will Campbell. Um, if Drake May is going to succeed, he's going to need protection. We've kind of talked a little bit about some of the weaknesses on their offensive line in previous videos, and Campbell brings some support to that unit. We have talked about Campbell plenty. If you guys want to hear about that, you can look at all our other videos. So I'm not going to beat this horse to death, but I do really love the pick of Will Campbell to go and fill in the blind side, protect Drake May, and also Vrabel really likes to run left, so that's also probably a really good slot in there for them to be able to open up the running lanes.
Yeah, the New England Patriots had the worst offensive line in the NFL last year. Nobody can argue with that, frankly. And Will Campbell is a lot of people. Oh, his short arms, blah blah blah. Like you said, we've talked about this ad nauseum at this point. But there was no question who they drafted there, and I'm a huge fan of it. I think that sometimes the most obvious solution is the best solution, and that's what Will Campbell is for New England.
Alrighty, that brings us down to the projected record for the New England Patriots. Ben, what do you have their record looking like?
Yeah, so like I said, I'm a pretty big fan of the New England Patriots, but I absolutely could see them having a couple of rough games. I don't think that they're going to be as bad in terms of statistics and coaching as they were last year, but I have a pretty broad projection on them in terms of height, in terms of floor and ceiling. My official projection for them is 9-8. I do think that they're going to be a winning team. However, close they cut it. My floor for them, however, is 5-12. It's better than 4-13 from last year, but you know they're a team that still needs to take a lot of steps before I'm considering them a good team in the NFL. So 5-12 for me is pretty logical, and then my ceiling is 10-7. I don't think that if they win games, if they're a winning team, they're going to be winning 13, 14 games. I think 10 is reasonable. I think 9 is most likely.
Interesting. Yeah, you're a little bit more optimistic about them than I am. I foresee some real growing pains. Obviously, they're going into a year with a sophomore quarterback. Weaknesses on the offense, rookie running back, and brand new coaching staff. So I think there's going to be some growing pains. I have them going 6-11 with a ceiling of 7-10 and a floor of 4-13. So kind of matching what they did this year. But I don't think they can get any worse than they did this past season. I really don't. I think there's going to be improvement. I really do think there's going to be some serious improvement. And there's always the potential that they could surprise me. But they also do have some pretty tough games on their schedule that might set them back a little bit.
As always, thank you guys so much for watching. We love doing what we do, and we love that you guys continue to give us the viewership. If you haven't already, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and that little bell for us. Next week, we're going to be discussing the second half of the AFC East. That is the Miami Dolphins and the New York Jets, two very exciting teams. One of them with a new coaching staff. So make sure to tune in next week, and we'll see you then.